Montana Territory, 1877. The wind tore over the high plains as if it had something to say, but no one left alive to hear it except for her. Alandra Sutton crouched beside the smoking wreckage of a wagon, hands trembling as she tried to quiet the shallow breathing of her 8-year-old sister, Elsie. The girl's face was pale, streaked with soot and blood. Their father lay nearby, still and gone, a rifle across his chest and his eyes wide open to the sky. Behind them, the rest of the wagon train was scattered, burned, broken, and silent. The Lakota had come at dawn, swift as fire through dry grass. Alandra had run with Elsie through the brush and broken rocks, hiding under a ledge until the sound of hooves vanished. But when she came back, there was nothing left, nothing but death. She looked down at her sister, whose lips were starting to turn blue. "You hold on, Elsie, I will get you help, I promise." Alandra stood, legs shaky, dress torn and bloodied. She had no gun, no food, just a canteen half filled with warm water. She had never felt more alone. Then came the sound of hooves. One rider, steady and slow. She stepped between her sister and the road, fists clenched, heart pounding. She had nothing to fight with, but she would die standing if she had to. The rider came into view, tall in the saddle, dust-covered, with a rifle slung across his back and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He stopped his horse 10 yards away, glanced at the wreckage, then slowly dismounted. "Easy," he said, voice low and even. "I am not here to hurt you." Alandra did not move. "You with them, if I was, you would already be dead." He took another step forward. She hesitated, then said, "My sister needs help. She is hurt bad." He nodded once. "Let me take a look." She watched him kneel beside the girl, pulling a small tin from his saddlebag. He worked quiet, hands steady, checking her pulse, lifting her gently to clean the wound at her hairline. "She is breathing shallow, but she is not dying," he said. "She needs rest and water." "You got a place to go?" Alandra shook her head. "Everyone's gone, just us now." He looked up at her, sun catching in his light hazel eyes. "Name's Everett Nash," he said. "Where were you headed?" "South, to Helena." "My father wanted to settle there." Everett stood. "That wagon train's gone." "You will not make it on your own." "I do not plan to. I just need to get Elsie safe." He undid the buckle of his gun belt and stepped forward, holding it out to her. "You want to survive? Start here." Alandra stared at the weapon. "I have never shot one." "Then you are about to learn." She took it, the leather still warm from his side. It was heavier than she expected, but it steadied something inside her. He nodded toward his horse. "I have a camp not far. Water supplies." "You are coming with me." She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the belt. "Why help us?" He looked her dead in the eye. "Because you need it, and because I have seen too many people left behind." Alandra studied his face. He had a scar that ran from the edge of his jaw into the collar of his shirt, like something tried to rip him apart once and failed. There was weariness in his features, but not cruelty. "All right," she said. "But if you try anything," Everett gave a short nod. "You have my gun." "I would say that makes you the dangerous one." He lifted Elsie gently, wrapping her in a blanket from his saddle. Then he led them both to his horse and helped Alandra up behind him. She held her sister close, the gun belt around her waist, and for the first time since dawn, something like hope stirred in her chest. They rode in silence through the broken hills, the sun dropping low behind them. Everett's camp was tucked into a hollow near a creek, out of sight and wind. He laid Elsie down on a bedroll and covered her, then handed Alandra a tin cup of clean water. "Drink slow." She did, then looked up. "Thank you." He sat across from her by the fire, watching the flames. "You got people back east?" "No, just the 3 of us. My mother died when I was little." "My father raised us himself." Everett nodded. "Same for me. My pa drank himself into the ground when I was 16, been drifting since. She glanced at the fire, then back at him. Why stay here? This land is cruel. His voice was quiet, because it is honest. You know where you stand with it. She looked at him, really looked. He was younger than she thought, maybe 30, but his face bore the weight of someone who had lived through too much. Still, there was something steady in him that calmed her, even now. I do not know what to do next, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You do not have to yet, Everett said. Just rest tonight. Tomorrow you learn how to shoot, she nodded. The fire crackled between them, and Elsie stirred in her sleep, breathing steadier now. Alandra tightened the blanket around her sister, then looked back at Everett. You saved us. He met her eyes. Not yet, but I will. And for the first time since the attack, she believed it. The morning came cold and colorless, mist hanging low over the creek. Alandra crouched near the edge of the water, cupping her hands to splash her face. Her dress stuck to her knees, still stiff with dried blood, but she worked methodically, washing away what she could. Behind her, the small fire had burned down to coals. Everett was already up, feeding oats to his mare and checking the saddle cinch. He moved with the quiet assurance of someone long used to solitude. When she returned, he handed her a strip of dried venison and a square of hardtack from his pack. Eat what you can. We'll need to move soon, he said, eyes still on the horizon. Is it safe to travel? She asked, glancing back toward the hills. No place is safe, but there's a doctor 3 days south in Deer Lodge. If we keep a steady pace, we can get there before your sister's fever returns. She chewed slowly, jaw tight. She was speaking in her sleep last night, called out for our mother. Everett knelt beside the bedroll. She's strong. You keep her warm and keep her still. Alandra brushed a curl from Elsie's forehead. I don't know how to do any of this. You will, Everett said, not unkindly. You don't have to know everything today. He unwrapped the rifle from its oilcloth and set it beside her. We'll start now. She stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. I don't want to miss. You will, he said simply. But you'll learn. They walked a short ways from camp, just out of sight from the bedroll. He handed her a spent cartridge and pointed to a knot on a fallen log 30 paces ahead. Keep both hands firm. Let the kick come through your arms, not your shoulder. She raised the rifle, jaw clenched, then lowered it. I keep seeing him, she said. My father. He always said to stay calm even when the horses ran wild. Everett didn't speak. He waited, arms crossed, letting her find the stillness on her own. She tried again, squaring her stance. The shot rang out, echoing through the ravine. The bullet missed wide. You leaned too far forward, Everett said. Let your body do the holding, not your arms. She adjusted. The second shot came closer. The third cracked the edge of the knot. Alandra lowered the rifle, breathing hard. Feels like I've been holding my breath since yesterday. You were, Everett said, but you're breathing now. They returned to camp. Elsie stirred when Alandra knelt beside her, and for the first time since the attack, her eyes opened. I'm thirsty, she whispered. Alandra pressed the canteen to her lips. Not too fast. Everett packed while they rested. He didn't ask questions, didn't linger. When she glanced at him, he was lashing his bedroll with steady hands, face unreadable. As they mounted up, Everett lifted Elsie gently into his arms, then handed the reins to Alandra. You'll ride. I'll walk beside. She's light enough not to strain the horse. Alandra hesitated. You're giving me your horse, borrowing, he said. You'll give her back when you can ride alone. They started south, moving slow along the narrow trail. The wind carried the scent of pine and damp earth. No one spoke for a long time. Hours passed. The sun climbed. At midday, they stopped beneath a stand of cottonwoods to rest the mare and feed Elsie broth from a tin Everett warmed over a twig fire. Alandra sat on a flat stone nearby, watching shadows shift across the ground. "You ever lose someone?" Everett didn't look up. "Yes." She waited. He didn't say more. After a while she asked, "How long before it stops hurting?" He set the tin aside. "You learn to live around it, like walking with a limp." She nodded, eyes on the ground. "He taught me how to mend harness and read trail signs. I never thought I'd have to do it alone." "You're not," Everett said. She turned to him. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said without looking away. That night they made camp near a dry wash. Everett slept on one side of the fire, rifle across his chest. Alandra laid Elsie between them, her small body warm beneath the quilt Everett had offered. Alandra didn't sleep. She watched the stars shift above the ridge, and once she caught Everett sitting up, staring into the dark. "You sleep with one eye open?" she asked, voice hushed. "Only when it matters." She pulled the quilt tighter around Elsie. "What did you do before all this?" "Ranger," he said. "Tracked men, recovered stolen cattle, did a few things I don't talk about." "Why'd you stop?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Started seeing more dead men than living ones. Figured I'd be next if I didn't quit." The fire popped, sending a spark skyward. Alandra didn't press him. Eventually he spoke again. "You did fine with the rifle." "I missed twice," she said. "You stood your ground, that's what counts." She looked across the fire at him. "I don't know what kind of man gives a stranger his gun and horse." Everett's voice was steady. "The kind who knows what it's like to have no one left." She didn't say anything after that, but when she lay down again she slept. Not deeply, but enough, long enough to dream. They reached the edge of the Bitterroot foothills by the second evening, the sun low and red behind a stand of firs. Alandra dismounted stiffly, legs aching from hours in the saddle, and helped Everett lower Elsie from the mare's back. The girl had dozed most of the ride. Her fever cooled but not gone. The air smelled of pine pitch and river stone. A small clearing opened near a bend in the creek, where Everett set down his pack and scanned the trees. "Deer Lodge is another day south," he said. "If we rest here, we can make it by dusk tomorrow." Alandra knelt beside her sister, tugging the blanket tighter around the girl's shoulders. She seemed cooler today. "She is," Everett said. "But if that wound draws bad, we'll need more than hot water and bandages." He removed his coat and laid it over a patch of dry grass. Alandra didn't miss the way his left shoulder moved slower than his right, like something old and half-healed tugged at the joint. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing." She stood. "You favor that arm every time you lift her." He crouched beside the fire pit, laying kindling with careful precision. "Took a bullet years back. Missed bone but left things twisted. Still works. You should have let me carry her today. She's safer in my arms than yours right now." Alandra bristled. "You think I can't handle her?" "I think you're still learning to hold a rifle steady," he said, striking flint to steel. "This isn't about pride." She watched as the spark caught the dry moss, smoke curling up slow. "You don't talk like most men I've known." He sat back on his heels. "Most men you've known grow up behind fences." "I didn't." Alandra reached for the canteen and poured a little into a dented tin cup, then knelt to help Elsie drink. "She used to sing to the chickens," she said softly. "Every morning, like it was a chore that needed a tune." Everett stirred the fire. "She'll sing again." Alandra looked up. "You sure about that?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I've seen men come back from worse. Children hold on longer than we think." They sat in the hush between wind and flame. Alandra glanced toward the creek, where the water caught the last of the light, scattered gold over stone. "Why'd you come this way?" Everett asked. She didn't answer right away. "Then my father heard there were jobs in Helena, something steady. He thought we might finally stop moving." Everett set a pan on the fire, adding strips of salted meat. "My folks tried homesteading once, in Kansas." Drought took the crop, then cholera took my little brother. Elandra looked across the fire. How old was he? 7. She nodded slowly. Elsie's 8. I remember, he said, voice low. He used to carry around a slingshot and say he was going to hunt buffalo. Never hit a thing. The meat sizzled in the pan. Elandra leaned back on her hands, watching the sky deepen. My father said loss teaches you to listen more than speak, she said. I'm starting to believe him. Everett turned the strips of meat with his knife. He was right. Later, after they'd eaten and the fire burned low, Everett stood and picked up his rifle. I'll check the ridge. I'll stay with her, Elandra said. He paused. You remember what I showed you, she nodded. Keep my stance wide. Breathe before I squeeze. If anything comes, don't wait. Fire once and loud. He disappeared into the trees, footsteps soft over pine needles. Elandra tucked the rifle across her lap and sat close to her sister. The girl's breath had evened out again, her cheeks no longer flushed. The stars blinked above the treetops, quiet and bright. When Everett returned, he didn't speak. He just sat nearby, close enough she could hear the leather of his coat creak as he settled. After a while, she asked, You ever think about staying somewhere? He didn't look at her. Sometimes. What stops you? Trust, he said. Hard to root something where too much has been burned. Elandra watched the firelight trace his profile. Not everything burns. He turned his head, eyes meeting hers. No, sometimes it just waits. Neither of them spoke after that. But when he lay down near the edge of the firelight, he kept his hand close to the rifle. And she didn't feel the need to hold hers quite so tightly. They broke camp before the sun cleared the trees. Frost clung to the edges of the blanket Elandra wrapped around Elsie, and the mare's breath steamed in the cold air. Everett tightened the cinch on the saddle, boots crunching over stiff grass, then adjusted the pack behind the horn where he'd tucked the last of their jerky. You ride with her again, he said. We'll make the flats by noon if we keep a steady pace. Elandra nodded, lifting her sister with practiced care. Elsie stirred only faintly, curls damp against her temple. She's lighter than she was 2 days ago. She'll eat better once we get to town, Everett said. There's a woman near the station who knows how to treat fever, married a Union medic after the war. She's seen worse. They moved south with the land flattening beneath them, trees thinning into wide, open grass. The wind stirred dust from the trail, dry and restless. Elandra kept one hand on her sister's back and the other near the rifle tucked across her lap. The weight of the gun belt around her waist had become familiar now, not comfortable but known. Where did you learn to track? She asked, her voice low to keep from waking Elsie. Southwest of Abilene, Everett said. Worked cattle runs. Lost a horse once in a canyon and spent 3 days finding it. After that, I started paying closer attention. She glanced down at the trail. I've always followed others, never led. You're leading now, he said without looking back. Even if you don't feel it. They rode through the morning without pause. Around midday they came upon a dry creek where a stand of willows bent in the wind. Everett stopped, scanning the horizon. Something's wrong. No birds, he said. Not even crows. Elandra tightened her grip on the reins. You think someone's ahead? He pointed to a line of prints in the dust. Hoof marks too fresh to be theirs. 3 riders, maybe 4, he said. Heavy-set horses, could be ranchers. Could be worse. She looked down at Elsie, still asleep against her. We can't turn back. No, Everett said, but we'll cut east through the sagebrush, slower but quieter. They veered off the main trail, weaving through scrub and low rock. The sun beat down harder now, and the silence stretched long between them. Elandra didn't speak again until they stopped beneath a low bluff to water the horse. You ever think about your own family? She asked. Everett crouched near the trickle of water, cupping it to his mouth. Not in years. Not even for a day like this, He looked up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. I stopped imagining things I couldn't have. Alandra studied him. Do you still believe that? He stood slowly, brushing dust from his knees. I'm not sure what I believe anymore. They reached the edge of a cottonwood grove as the afternoon waned. In the distance, smoke curled from a chimney, thin and gray against the sky. Deer Lodge, Everett said, pointing. Alandra exhaled, her shoulders sagging with it. I thought maybe I'd imagined it, that we'd ride forever and never reach anything. You reached it, he said. Now we finish it. They passed a cluster of rail sheds and a blacksmith's forge before turning toward the small clapboard house Everett had mentioned. A woman with silver-streaked hair stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She didn't ask questions when Everett carried Elsie inside, just led them to a narrow bed beside the hearth and began mixing willow bark in a tin cup. Alandra stood nearby, eyes fixed on her sister's face. She's in good hands now, Everett said gently. I know, she whispered. Outside, the wind had gone still. The mare stood tethered near the post, head low. Everett leaned against the porch rail, watching the sky darken to that soft blue just before dusk. Alandra stepped out a moment later, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands still damp from washing. She's sleeping again, she said. The woman said the fever's broken. Everett gave a slight nod. You did what most wouldn't. She looked at him then, not in gratitude, but with something steadier. You gave me the chance to do it. He didn't answer at first. Then, you remember what I said about the gun belt? I remember everything, she said. He slid the rifle from his shoulder, resting it against the porch. You don't need it now. I think I do, she said. Not for the same reasons. Everett turned to her, eyes narrowing softly. What reasons then? She stepped closer, the space between them finally quiet. Because I'm not the same woman who ran from the fire, and I don't want to forget how I got here. His voice dropped. You're not alone anymore, Alandra. She reached out, fingers brushing the edge of his coat. I know. They stood together, the wind beginning to rise again, gentle this time. Alandra didn't move away when Everett's hand found hers. She let it stay, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. They stayed in Deer Lodge for 6 days. The woman Everett knew Mrs. Penfield was a widow with a sharp tongue and a gentler hand, and she took to caring for Elsie as if the child were her own kin. Alandra helped where she could, filling the stove with kindling each morning, sweeping dust from the corners of the cabin, keeping Elsie clean and fed. She didn't know what comfort was supposed to feel like, but by the second evening, she stopped waking in the night with her heart racing. Everett didn't linger inside the house. He spent most daylight hours doing chores for the livery in exchange for oats and stall rest for his mare. He returned each evening with the quiet patience Alandra had come to rely on, never asking what she needed, just making sure it was there. On the third morning, he handed her a folded paper as she sat on the front steps shelling peas. A man in town's looking to hire help for spring branding. Pays fair. He's got a bunkhouse, too. She looked up, sun catching in her lashes. You think I should work cattle? I think you've done harder things already. He crouched beside her. I also think you're trying to figure out if this place could be yours. She looked toward the cottonwoods behind the house, where Elsie was napping on a quilt. It's not much. It's enough, he said. If you want it. She folded the paper and set it beside the bowl. You planning on riding out soon? Haven't decided. Why not? He didn't answer right away. Then, I've been alone so long I forgot what it felt like to have somewhere to go back to. She glanced at him. That sounds more like a reason to stay. That night, they ate supper on the porch, salt pork and cornmeal biscuits, with beans cooked slow over Mrs. Penfield's stove. Afterward, Alandra wandered down to the creek edge, where the stones were mossy and cool under her bare feet. Everett followed just far enough to give her space, but close enough to be near if she wanted him. "I've been thinking," she said, arms crossed against the cool breeze. "About what comes next." He waited, hands in his coat pockets. "I don't want to keep running. I want Elsie to grow up knowing what it means to stay somewhere, to learn names, plant things, put up curtains." She turned to him. "But I don't want to do it alone." He stepped forward, slow and certain. "You don't have to." "There's no promise this'll be easy," she said. "I'm not after easy," he said. "I'm after honest, and I'd like to build something with you if you'll let me." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I want that too." They kissed beneath the cottonwoods, the leaves whispering above them, and it didn't feel sudden. It felt like something that had been growing quietly, leaf by leaf, until it finally bloomed. By the end of the week, Alandra accepted the branding job. Everett took work at the blacksmith's, helping mend tack and haul wood. He rented a room above the general store, though he spent most evenings on the Penfield porch, watching Elsie chase grasshoppers in the tall grass. Mrs. Penfield gave Alandra her spare sewing machine, and together they stitched curtains for the windows. The bunkhouse boss's wife gave her a cutting from her rose bush. Everett built a trellis for it, slow and careful, so the roots wouldn't crowd too close to the house. They married before the first frost. The town preacher stood beneath the cottonwoods, and Elsie scattered dried flower petals from a basket she insisted on carrying herself. Everett wore a clean white shirt, and Alandra wore a blue calico dress with a ribbon she'd found in her mother's old trunk. There wasn't a crowd, just Mrs. Penfield, the preacher's wife, and a few folks from the livery. But when Everett said, "I will," and Alandra answered the same, it felt like the world itself stopped long enough to listen. Afterward, they shared stew and biscuits and sweet cider with the neighbors. Elsie fell asleep on Everett's lap that night, thumb tucked under her chin, and he didn't stir until she was carried off to bed. Years passed quietly and full. Everett built them a house with 2 rooms and a proper porch. Alandra planted beans and squash behind it. Elsie grew tall and strong with a wild laugh and a steady shot. She sang to the chickens every morning just like before. Everett never left again. He carried his old scars with grace, but he didn't let them steer him. He worked the forge until his shoulders ached and came home each night smelling of iron and smoke, happy to be kissed at the door. Alandra taught Elsie to sew, to read, to speak her mind. She filled their home with quilts and stories, and every spring the rosebush bloomed a little fuller than the year before. They didn't chase after peace anymore. They lived in it, and it held.